Hello, welcome back to Behind the Faders, the live sound channel. In the past, we covered everything that comes out of a sub speaker, we covered everything that comes out of a low mid speaker, so today we're going to cover high mids and treble. First of all, from a system engineer standpoint, these frequencies are both difficult and easy. Very short wavelength, easy to steer, you can steer them very precisely, up to a point where, for example, if you have an arena that has VIP lounges all around with a glass window in front, you can avoid hitting these windows, at least with the very high frequencies. That's the upside. The downside is because you can steer them so precisely, you also have to steer them very precisely to make sure you have an even coverage in the room of these frequencies. So, for example, if you design a line array and you work out the angles between the speakers, you always look at a high frequency like 5K to make sure you got an even coverage. So when it comes to dealing with high mids and treble in the mix, the challenge is a good balance between clarity and harshness. But let's start at the very bottom of that range, around the dividing frequency between low mids and horns. And this is probably just me. It's a personal thing, but I still use graphic EQs for tuning systems, and I always reduce 1.25K. Always. I just hate that frequency. I think the world is a much better place without 1.25K. But maybe that's just me. Let me know. Above that, so let's say 1.6 to 2K, this is an area that you have to watch. For example, if you do a sound check in an empty room with a floor made of stone or a similar material, because you will get a lot of reflections off that floor in that frequency range. Does that mean you just leave these frequencies in, knowing that these reflections will be gone when the people are in? Well, I don't, because it's just distracting me. So I will reduce that area a little bit, but I will keep it in mind. And this will be one of the first things to listen for when the show starts. If it's still okay with these frequencies out a little, or if I have to bring them back. Above that, like 2.5K to 4K around, this is where this harshness sits of guitars, maybe saxophones, could also be keyboard sounds, and vocals. And with vocals, it can be kind of really problematic because some voices, and preferably kind of voice that I kind of enjoy most, which is a strong female voice, a Tina Turner kind of voice, they tend to get sharp when they sing in higher registers. So if they sing lower, no problem, but if they sing in higher registers, now it's getting sharp and annoying and painful. And this is one of the points where my keep it simple rule does not really apply, because this calls for a dynamic EQ. A dynamic EQ is an EQ where you set a center frequency, like on any parametric EQ, but you always set a threshold. And this EQ only works if the incoming signal raises above that threshold. So you would set that frequency to, let's say, 2.5K, and as long as the voice is not harsh, this EQ wouldn't do anything. But when it gets harsh and rises above that threshold, then this frequency would be carved out a little. That's the only way you can handle that. At least the only way that I can think of. Above the harshness comes the sharpness. So let's say between 5, 6K and 8K. This is the area where an S in a voice becomes way too sharp if it's overcompressed, which you shouldn't compress it that hard anyway, but that's one of the results. If you compress it too much, you will get sharp S's. So now you have to introduce a de-esser. Also in that area, cymbals can be very sharp, a hi-hat can be very sharp, and that's just as painful as harshness. All the frequencies above that, so starting at 8, 9K up to however far you can still hear. Usually you don't have to interfere with these. You don't have to adjust anything other than maybe cleaning this area a little bit by using high cuts on certain instruments, because a lot of instruments don't get that high. So to clean up your sound, you might give them a high cut, like first of all tom-toms or anything on the drums that has a shell. But also, for example, if you're mixing an orchestra, all the strings, give them a high cut. A lot lower than that, actually, 6K or something. Because if you're new to mixing an orchestra, you might expect some silky treble on your violins, for example, which is never there. And if you feature high frequencies on a violin, all you get is unwanted noises like turning of the pages, breathing, and you don't want that. So again, the only thing I usually do in this very high register is cleaning up the area a little bit, so that only the signal that makes sense up there reach these frequencies. And that's already it. That's all I can think of telling you about high mids and treble. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section, please. If you have a lot of questions or a certain combination of questions, if it's technical or mindset or a combo of both, consider booking yourself a coaching call. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please catch up on that. It helps me a lot, and it's free for use, just a click. I see you around. Bye-bye.